On a late-night subway train, an exhausted poor waitress just wanted to get home as quickly as possible after a brutal shift. But right before stepping off, she noticed an elderly white homeless man burning with fever, shaking, mumbling in delirium. Without hesitation, she turned back, helped him off the train, brought a complete stranger into her cramped apartment, and cared for him through the night with cold water, damp cloths, and the little food she had. What she didn't know was that the feverish homeless man was the father of a billionaire, and the choice she made that night would change all of their lives forever. The fluorescent lights of the diner hummed like tired insects, casting everything in that particular shade of yellow that made even young skin look exhausted. Amina Brooks wiped down table 7 for the third time, not because it needed it, but because standing still meant feeling how much her feet ached. 2:17 in the morning. Manhattan never slept, but it did get quieter, and in that quiet the weight pressed harder. She caught her reflection in the window between the neon signs. 26 years old, but tonight she could pass for 35. Her dark skin had lost some of its glow months ago, somewhere between the double shifts and the pharmacy runs. Her braids, usually neat, now showed the frizz of someone who hadn't had time to sit in front of a mirror in weeks. Behind the counter, Linda counted the register, her reading glasses perched on her nose. The older woman glanced up, caught Amina staring at nothing, and said nothing. That was the thing about Linda. She noticed everything but only spoke when it mattered. Amina's phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A text from Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who watched Noah on nights like this. He had a small episode around midnight, used his inhaler. Sleeping now, don't worry, don't worry. 3 months behind on rent. Pharmacy wanted $92 for the next inhaler refill. The landlord had slipped another notice under her door yesterday, the paper crisp and white and final looking. Don't worry. She pressed her palm against the cold window, letting the chill seep into her skin. Outside, a homeless man shuffled past, pushing a shopping cart filled with things that probably meant everything to him and nothing to anyone else. That could be me, she thought. One missed paycheck. One bad month. One more thing going wrong. The thought didn't scare her anymore. Fear required energy she couldn't spare. Amina, Linda's voice cut through the fog. The older woman held out a small paper bag, grease spots already forming on the bottom. Leftover burger, fries too. Take it home for the boy. Amina opened her mouth to say she couldn't accept it, that she wasn't charity, that she was handling things just fine. But Linda had already turned back to the register, and the words died somewhere in Amina's throat. She tucked the bag into her purse and finished her shift in silence. The subway platform at 3 in the morning held a different kind of humanity. Amina sat on the bench, her back against the cold tile wall, and watched a rat brave the tracks. Somewhere down the tunnel, a train rumbled, but it wasn't hers. Her mind drifted, the way it always did when her body was too tired to keep it anchored. She thought about Noah. 8 years old, too smart for his own good, with lungs that betrayed him and eyes that saw too much. He'd stopped asking about their mother 2 years ago, around the same time he'd stopped asking for birthday presents that cost money. Last week he'd handed her a drawing, stick figures, the way kids draw them, but with details that broke her heart. One tall figure with braids, one small figure with a big smile, and above them both the word home in crooked letters. That's us, he'd said, pointing. And that's our apartment. I made the windows bigger so more sun can come in. She'd told him it was beautiful. She hadn't told him that the landlord wanted them out by the end of the month. The train arrived, mostly empty, and Amina found a seat near the door. Her eyes grew heavy, the rhythm of the wheels, a lullaby she couldn't afford to surrender to. That's when she heard her grandmother's voice. Not literally. Ba Ruth had been gone for 4 years now, taken by a stroke that came without warning on a Tuesday afternoon. But sometimes, in moments like this, Amina could hear her as clearly as if she were sitting right beside her. Child, you listening? Ba Ruth had raised Amina after her mother chose the needle over her daughter. Raised her in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, on a pension that stretched thin but never broke. Taught her to cook greens and cornbread, to iron a shirt so sharp it could cut, to look people in the eye even when they didn't want to see her. But the lesson that stuck hardest came on a winter night much like this one. Amina had been 12. They'd been walking home from church when they passed a man slumped against a building, shaking from cold or withdrawal or both. Amina had pulled at her grandmother's hand, trying to walk faster, but Ba Ruth had stopped. She'd taken off her own scarf, the blue one with the frayed edges, and wrapped it around the man's neck. Then she'd pressed $2 into his palm, money they didn't have to spare, and said something Amina couldn't hear. On the walk home, Amina had asked why. Why give away what they needed? Why stop for a stranger who might not even remember it tomorrow? Ba Ruth had looked at her with those eyes that seemed to see past skin and bone into something deeper. If you turn away when you could have stopped, you carry that with you forever. Every time you close your eyes, you'll see the face you walked past. That weight don't ever lift, child. Not ever. Amina had been too young to understand then. Now, at 26, with feet that ached and a heart that felt like it was wrapped in wet cloth, she understood too well. The train rocked gently, carrying her toward home, toward Noah, toward another day of just barely surviving. She didn't know that in 3 stops, everything would change. She didn't know that the choice Ba Ruth had talked about, the one that marks you forever, was waiting for her in the last car of a late-night subway train. All she knew was that she was tired, and that tired didn't matter, because Noah was waiting, and that was enough to keep her moving. The subway car was nearly empty when Amina transferred at 42nd Street, just her, a man in a business suit sleeping with his briefcase clutched to his chest, and a teenage couple sharing earbuds in the corner. She found a seat near the middle, and let her head fall back against the window. 4 more stops, then a 7-minute walk, then she could finally close her eyes. The train lurched forward, and Amina watched the tunnel walls blur past. Graffiti tags and old advertisements flickered like memories half forgotten. That's when she heard it. A cough, wet and rattling, the kind that came from somewhere deep. She turned her head without really meaning to. At the far end of the car, a figure sat hunched on the bench. An old man, white, with a beard that had gone past gray into something closer to yellow. His clothes were layered, the way homeless people learn to dress, but they were soaked through, clinging to a frame that seemed too thin to hold together. He was shaking, not from cold alone. This was different. This was fever. Amina looked away. The business suit man hadn't moved. The teenage couple was lost in whatever music they were sharing. None of them had noticed. Or maybe they had, and they'd made their choice already. The old man coughed again, and this time it ended in a moan. A word maybe, something that sounded like a name. Amina's stop was next. She could feel the train beginning to slow, could see the platform lights approaching through the window. All she had to do was stand up, walk to the door, step out, go home to Noah. The old man's voice came again, clearer this time. Emily. He wasn't talking to anyone on the train. He was talking to someone who wasn't there, someone his fever-bright eyes could see but no one else could. Emily, please. Amina stood up. Her legs moved toward the door, muscle memory from 1,000 late nights. But then she made the mistake of looking at him again. His eyes found hers, pale blue clouded with confusion and sickness, but in that moment, terribly, horribly aware. Don't leave me, he whispered. Please, don't leave me here. The train stopped, the doors opened, cold air rushed in from the platform. Amina stood frozen in the doorway. She thought about Noah, waiting at home. She thought about the rent notice. She thought about how every second she stood here was a second she couldn't afford. And then she thought about Ba Ruth, taking off her scarf in the winter cold, pressing money into a stranger's hand. If you turn away when you could have stopped, the doors began to close. Amina stepped back into the train. She moved down the car, her worn sneakers squeaking on the floor, and knelt beside the old man. Up close, she could smell the sickness on him, could see the way his lips had cracked, and his skin had gone pale beneath the dirt. His hand found hers, and she nearly pulled away. His grip was weak, but desperate. Emily, he said again. I'm not Emily, Amina said quietly, but I'm here. I'm not going to leave you. The train moved on, carrying them both into the dark. The business suit man finally looked up, saw what was happening, and looked away again. The teenage couple got off at the next stop without a backward glance, and Amina stayed because Ba Ruth was right. Some choices follow you forever. This was going to be one of them. The walk from the subway to her building took twice as long as usual. The old man could barely stand, let alone walk, and Amina ended up half carrying him. His arms slung over her shoulders, his weight pressing down on muscles that had nothing left to give. Twice he stumbled. Twice she caught him. Once he stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and looked around with eyes that saw a different city, a different time. "The office," he mumbled. "I have to get to the office. The designs aren't finished." "It's okay," Amina said, guiding him forward. "The office can wait." She didn't know what office he meant, didn't know anything about him, except that he was burning with fever and might not make it through the night without help. Mrs. Patterson's apartment was dark when Amina reached her building, which meant the older woman had gone to bed after texting. Amina would have to explain in the morning. Or maybe she wouldn't explain at all. Some things were harder to put into words than others. She unlocked her door, as quietly as she could, and helped the old man inside. The apartment was small. 2 rooms, if you counted the space where the kitchen met the living room. Noah's bed was in the corner, surrounded by drawings taped to the wall and schoolbooks stacked on the floor. He was asleep, his small chest rising and falling with the careful rhythm of a child whose lungs had learned to betray him. Amina guided the old man to the couch, lowering him down slowly. He sank into the cushions like a man who hadn't sat on something soft in months. "Stay here," she whispered. "I'm going to get some water." She filled a glass from the kitchen tap and grabbed the thermometer from the medicine cabinet. When she pressed it to the old man's forehead, the number that appeared made her stomach drop. 103.8. She needed to get him to a hospital. But hospitals asked questions. Hospitals wanted insurance cards and identification and explanations for why a young black woman had brought in a sick white homeless man at 4 in the morning. She thought about the way the police had looked at her last month when she'd reported a broken window in the laundromat. Suspicious, like she was the problem, not the solution. No hospital, not yet, not unless she had no other choice. She found a washcloth, soaked it in cool water, and pressed it to the old man's forehead. He flinched at first, then relaxed, his eyes fluttering closed. "Emily," he said again, softer now. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to forget." Amina didn't answer. She just kept the cloth pressed to his skin and watched his breathing slowly steady. The sound of small footsteps made her turn. Noah stood in the doorway between the rooms, his pajamas too short at the ankles, his eyes wide and watchful. "Mina?" His voice was thick with sleep. "Who's that?" Amina felt the weight of the moment settle onto her shoulders. How do you explain something like this to an 8-year-old? How do you tell him that you brought a stranger into their home? A sick stranger, because you couldn't bear to walk away. "He needed help," she said finally. He was sick and alone, and he needed help. Noah studied the old man on the couch for a long moment. Then he looked at Amina with an expression that was too old for his face. "Like when my chest gets tight and you stay up all night." Amina's throat tightened. "Yeah, baby, like that." Noah nodded slowly, some decision clicking into place behind his eyes. "I'll get the other blanket," he said, and disappeared back into the bedroom. He returned with the quilt that usually covered his own bed, the one with the faded stars, and the torn corner that Amina kept meaning to fix. Without a word, he helped her spread it over the old man's shaking form. "What's his name?" Noah asked. Amina realized she didn't know. She looked at the old man's face, searching for some clue, some identification, but there was nothing. Just a stranger with a fever and a name he kept calling that wasn't his own. "I don't know yet," she admitted. Noah considered this. "Can I call him Mr. for now?" "Sure, baby, Mr. works." They sat together in the dim light, the old man's labored breathing filling the silence. At some point, Noah leaned against Amina's shoulder, and she wrapped an arm around him, holding him close. "You did good," Noah murmured sleepily. "Bringing him home. Ba Ruth would be proud." The words hit Amina harder than she expected. Her eyes stung, and she blinked quickly, refusing to let the tears fall. "Get back to bed," she said gently. "You have school tomorrow." Noah obeyed without protest, which told her how tired he really was. She watched him disappear into the bedroom, then turned back to the man on her couch. His eyes were open now, watching her with that same strange mix of confusion and clarity. "You didn't have to," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know, then why?" Amina thought about Ba Ruth, about the scarf and the $2 and the weight you carry forever. "Because you asked me not to leave," she said simply, "and nobody should have to beg for that." The old man's eyes glistened. For a moment she thought he might cry. Instead he said, "Walter, my name is Walter, I'm Amina, Amina." He repeated it slowly, like he was committing it to memory. Thank you, Amina. The fever rose and fell through the night like a tide. Amina stayed awake, changing the washcloth, coaxing sips of water into Walter when he was lucid enough to swallow, and watching his chest for any sign that the breathing was getting worse. Twice he spoke clearly, startling her with sudden coherence. The first time, he gripped her wrist and said, "The bridge, they're building it wrong. I told them the supports won't hold, but they didn't listen. They never listen." The second time, his voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "Don't let them take me. Please, they want to put me somewhere. They want to forget I exist." Both times, Amina just nodded and said, "You're safe. No one's taking you anywhere." She didn't know if it was true. She didn't know anything really. Just that this old man was sick and scared and alone, and that she'd made a choice she couldn't take back. Around 5 in the morning, the fever finally broke. Walter's skin cooled, his breathing deepened, and he fell into something that looked more like sleep than delirium. Amina stayed in the chair beside him, watching the gray light of dawn creep through the window. She should have been exhausted. She was exhausted. But beneath the tiredness, there was something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose, not the grinding kind that came from survival. Something warmer, something that felt almost like hope. She looked at the sleeping man on her couch, at his weathered face and his trembling hands, and she wondered who Emily was, wondered what office he was trying to get to, wondered how a person ended up alone on a subway train in the middle of the night with no one in the world to call. She didn't have the answers yet, but she had made a choice, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, that choice felt right. Noah found her asleep in the chair when he woke up for school. He didn't wake her, just grabbed a granola bar from the cabinet and slipped out with his backpack, leaving a note on the table that said, in careful letters, "Don't worry, I'll be fine, take care of Mr." Amina woke an hour later, groggy and disoriented, to find Walter watching her. "You stayed," he said. "I told you I would." He looked around the small apartment, taking in the drawings on the walls, and the stacks of school books and the quilt with the faded stars. "This is your home." "It's not much." Walter shook his head slowly. "It's everything." Amina didn't know what to say to that, so she just stood up and went to the kitchen. "I'm going to make some soup," she said, "and then we're going to figure out what to do next." She didn't know what next looked like, didn't know if there even was a next for a situation like this, but she knew she wasn't going to walk away. Not now, not ever. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and old paper. Amina sat on a plastic chair, Walter beside her, and waited for someone to help. They'd been waiting for 47 minutes. The officer behind the front desk had looked at them once when they walked in, then went back to his paperwork. 2 other officers had passed through, neither making eye contact. A woman in a business suit had filed a report about a stolen purse and been out the door in 15 minutes. Amina and Walter were still waiting. Finally, a heavy-set officer with a name tag that read Miller approached them. His eyes moved over Walter's stained clothes and matted beard, then to Amina's tired face, and something shifted in his expression. "What seems to be the problem here?" Amina stood up straight, keeping her voice calm and measured. "I found this man on the subway last night. He was sick, disoriented. He doesn't remember who he is, or where he lives. I brought him here hoping you could help identify him." Miller looked at Walter. "Sir, can you tell me your name?" Walter blinked slowly. "Walter," he said. "My name is Walter." Then his face clouded. "But I can't remember the rest." Miller sighed, the kind of sigh that said this was just another problem on a long list of problems he didn't want to deal with. "No ID, no address, no family contacts, nothing," Amina said. "That's why I brought him here. Ma'am, we can't just take in every confused homeless person who wanders through. He's not just confused, he's sick, he needs help. There must be a missing persons database, something you can check." Miller exchanged a look with the officer behind the desk. The look said everything his words didn't. "Why is this my problem? We can run him through the system," Miller said finally. "But if nothing comes up, the best we can do is send him to a shelter, or you can take him to the hospital. And if he doesn't have insurance, that's between him and the hospital." Amina felt the anger rising in her chest, hot and familiar. She'd felt this before. Every time she dealt with landlords who saw her skin before her rent payments. Every time she'd watched Noah get followed around a store by security guards. Every time the system reminded her that people like her were always suspect, never supported. He's a human being, she said, her voice steady despite the fire inside. He's scared and sick, and alone. There has to be something more you can do. Miller's expression hardened. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to lower your voice. I haven't raised my voice. You're becoming aggressive. The word hung in the air like a slap. Aggressive, the word they always used. The word that turned her justified anger into something threatening, something dangerous, something that deserved punishment, instead of attention. Amina took a breath, then another. She thought about Noah, waiting at home. She thought about what would happen if she pushed this any further. Fine, she said quietly. What do I need to do? Miller pulled out a form and slid it across the counter. If you want to assume temporary responsibility for him, you'll need to sign this. But I should warn you, if anything happens while he's in your care, if he hurts himself, if he hurts someone else, if he turns out to be wanted for something, you're liable. Amina looked at the form. The words swam before her tired eyes. I, the undersigned, hereby accept full legal responsibility. Walter touched her arm. You don't have to, he said quietly. I've burdened you enough. She looked at him, at this old man who didn't even know his own last name, who had no one in the world except a stranger he'd met on a subway train. If you turn away when you could have stopped. Amina picked up the pen and signed her name. Miller watched her with something that might have been surprise, or might have been contempt. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. You're taking a big risk, he said. I know. She helped Walter to his feet, and they walked out of the police station together. Behind them, she heard Miller say something to the other officer. She didn't catch all of it, but she caught enough, probably trying to get something out of him. These people always have an angle. Amina kept walking. She'd heard worse, she'd survived worse, and she had more important things to do than teach a stranger how to see her as human. The walk home was quiet. Walter seemed more alert now, his fever still down, though his steps remained unsteady. He looked around at the buildings and street signs like a man trying to remember a dream. I know this city, he said suddenly. I think. Something about the way it feels. Amina slowed. What do you remember? Walter's brow furrowed. Nothing I can hold on to. Just shadows. Like there's something behind a door I can't open. What's behind the door? He shook his head. I don't know. Every time I reach for it, it moves away. They walked on in silence. But Amina tucked the moment away, small as it was. He knew this city. It wasn't much, but it was something. The first few days blurred together like watercolors in rain. Amina fell into a routine she hadn't planned for, one that wrapped itself around her existing life and pulled tight. Wake up early. Check on Walter. Make sure Noah had breakfast. Walk Noah to the corner where Mrs. Patterson would watch him until school. Go back. Check on Walter again. Try to coax information from a mind that gave back only fragments. Walter slept a lot. The fever had broken, but whatever illness had grabbed hold of him left exhaustion in its wake. He would wake, eat whatever Amina could afford to feed him, and then drift off again, his breathing steady but his face troubled even in sleep. When he was awake he was gentle, quiet. He apologized constantly, for taking up space, for eating their food, for existing in a life that was already stretched too thin. You should let me go, he said one afternoon, while Amina was folding laundry. Find a shelter. Something. You've done enough. Amina didn't look up from the shirts in her hands. You remember where the shelters are? No. You remember how to get there? No. Then how exactly would you go? Walter didn't answer. Amina finished folding a shirt, added it to the pile, and finally met his eyes. You stay until we figure out who you are. That's the deal. I didn't agree to any deal. Neither did I. But here we are. Something shifted in Walter's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. You're stubborn. I've been told. The arrangement with Linda held, barely. Walter spent Amina's shifts in the back booth of the diner, nursing cups of coffee that Amina paid for out of her tips. He sat quietly watching the world through the window, occasionally scribbling on napkins with a pen Amina had given him. The scribbles were strange. Numbers mostly, arranged in patterns that meant nothing to Amina but seemed to mean something to Walter. Once she saw him draw what looked like a bridge, the lines precise despite his trembling hands. "What's that?" she asked during a break. Walter looked down at the napkin as if seeing it for the first time. "I don't know," he said. "My hand just knows." She wanted to ask more, but a customer called for a refill, and the moment passed. At home, Noah began to orbit around Walter like a small planet finding its sun. It started small. Noah would sit on the floor near the couch, doing homework, occasionally asking Walter to help with math problems. Walter couldn't always help, his mind slipping between clarity and fog, but when he could, his explanations were patient and thorough, like a teacher who had once loved his work. "You're good at this," Noah said one evening, after Walter had walked him through a long division problem. Walter's hands trembled as he set down the pencil. "I used to be good at a lot of things. I think." "What things?" The fog rolled in. Walter's eyes went distant. "I don't remember." But Noah didn't push, he just picked up another worksheet and said, "That's okay, we can figure it out together." Amina watched from the kitchen, something warm and painful spreading through her chest. Noah had never known his grandfather, had never known any family except Amina and the fading memory of Ba Ruth. He'd never had someone old to look up to, someone who could bridge the gap between childhood and wisdom. And Walter, for all his confusion, seemed to brighten around Noah. The tremors in his hands steadied when he held the pencil. His eyes grew clearer when he explained the math. He was more present, more alive than Amina had ever seen him. It was dangerous, this growing attachment. Amina knew that Walter might have family somewhere, might have a life to go back to, might be taken away as suddenly as he'd arrived. But she couldn't bring herself to stop it. Not when Noah smiled like that. Not when Walter looked for just a moment, like he belonged somewhere. The neighbors noticed, of course they did. In a building like theirs, with walls thin as paper and gossip thick as fog, nothing stayed secret for long. Mrs. Chen was the first to confront her directly. She caught Amina in the hallway, her arms crossed, her eyes sharp. "That man is still here." "He is. How long are you planning to keep him?" "As long as he needs." Mrs. Chen's lips pressed into a thin line. "People are talking. They're saying you brought a stranger into the building, a homeless man. They're worried." "Worried about what?" "About what he might do, about what kind of person takes in someone like that." Amina felt the anger rise, but she kept her voice level. "He's sick and alone and has nowhere else to go. What kind of person would I be if I turned him away?" Mrs. Chen had no answer for that, but her expression made clear that she wasn't satisfied and that the conversation wasn't over. The police came 3 days later. 2 officers, neither of them Miller, knocked on Amina's door while she was getting ready for her shift. She opened it to find them standing in the hallway, their faces carefully neutral. "We've had some concerns raised," one of them said, "about an unidentified man staying at this address." Amina's heart pounded, but she kept her expression calm. "I reported him to the precinct. I signed papers, everything is documented. We're just following up. Mind if we come in? Do you have a warrant?" The officers exchanged a look. "No ma'am, this is just a welfare check." "Then I don't give permission." The younger officer shifted uncomfortably, but the older one held her gaze. "We're trying to help, ma'am. If this man is who you say he is, if he's really just someone you're helping out of the goodness of your heart, then you should have nothing to hide." The implication hung in the air, ugly and familiar. "What are you hiding? What's your angle? What are you getting out of this?" "He's not hiding," Amina said. "He's sleeping. He's an old man who's been through something terrible, and he needs rest. If you want to talk to him, come back when he's awake, and I'm here to make sure he's treated fairly." The officers left, but Amina knew they'd be back. They always came back. That night, after Noah was asleep and Walter was dozing on the couch, Amina sat at the kitchen table and tried to figure out what to do next. She'd asked Walter about his past a dozen times, but the answers were always the same. Fragments, shadows, doors that wouldn't open. He remembered Emily. He was certain Emily was important, someone he'd loved, someone he'd lost. But he couldn't remember if Emily was a wife, a daughter, a sister, just a name attached to grief. He remembered bridges, the feel of blueprints under his hands, arguments about load-bearing calculations and stress tolerances. But he couldn't remember where or when or with whom. He remembered fear, being somewhere cold and loud, with people who didn't see him. Being hungry, being invisible. but he couldn't remember how he'd gotten there or how long he'd been lost. Amina had tried searching online, typing in Walter and missing and elderly in New York, but the results were overwhelming and useless. Too many Walters, too many missing people, too many stories that ended badly. She didn't have enough information, didn't have a last name or a hometown or anything concrete to search for. All she had was a man who couldn't remember himself and a clock that felt like it was running out. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a Thursday evening. Walter was having one of his good spells, his eyes clear, his hands steady. He'd been watching Noah draw, offering suggestions about perspective and shading with a precision that surprised Amina. "You know a lot about art," she said. "Do I?" Walter looked at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. "I suppose I must have learned somewhere. What else do you know?" Walter was quiet for a long moment, then slowly he said, "I know how things are built, how they stand up, how they fall down." He paused. "I spent my life making sure things stayed standing." Amina leaned forward. "What things?" "Buildings, bridges." His voice was distant, like he was reading from a book he'd forgotten he'd written. "I used to argue with people about it, about safety, about doing things right instead of doing them cheap." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "They called me difficult. I called myself careful." "Where was this? What company?" The fog began to roll in. Walter's brow furrowed. I don't, it's okay," Amina said quickly. "Don't push. Just tell me what comes." "A desk," Walter said slowly. "A big desk with windows behind it, looking out at the city. I could see the water, a bridge in the distance." His voice cracked. "And a photo, on the desk. A woman and a boy. I looked at them every day. Emily." "Yes." The word came out as a whisper. "Emily," and his face contorted with effort. "And someone else. Someone I was supposed to protect. Someone I failed." Then the fog closed in completely, and Walter's eyes went blank and lost. "I'm tired," he said, as if the last minute hadn't happened. "I think I need to lie down." Amina helped him to the couch, her mind racing. A desk with windows, a view of water and a bridge, a company that built things. A wife named Emily, a son he felt he'd failed. It still wasn't enough to search with, but it was more than she'd had before. The next morning, Walter remembered nothing of the conversation, but Amina remembered every word. The breakthrough came from the most unlikely place, after the most unlikely journey. Amina had almost given up on the internet searches. Night after night, while Walter and Noah slept, she sat at the kitchen table with her cracked phone screen, typing combinations of words that led nowhere. Walter and missing brought up thousands of results. Too many Walters, too many missing men, too many families searching for people who had vanished into the margins of the world. She tried elderly man, and dementia, and New York subway. Nothing. She tried engineer and bridges and missing. Still nothing useful. One night, she found a post that made her heart stop. A man named Walter, mid-70s, last seen in Chicago. The description matched: white hair, blue eyes, confusion about time and place. She read through the details 3 times, hope building in her chest like pressure behind a dam. She crafted a careful message, describing her Walter in detail, asking if there might be a connection. She checked her phone every 15 minutes for the rest of the night, unable to sleep, imagining the relief of finally having an answer. The response came the next morning: found deceased January. Thank you for reaching out. Amina stared at the words until they blurred. Then she closed the browser and didn't search again for 3 days. But Walter was still there, still lost, still waiting for someone to claim him. So she started again. Another night, another lead. A forum post about a Walter who had wandered away from a nursing home in New Jersey. The photo showed a man with Walter's build, Walter's age, even Walter's way of tilting his head slightly to the left. Amina spent an hour crafting a message, choosing each word carefully, trying to sound credible without sounding desperate. The response came quickly this time. Thank you for your kindness in reaching out. Our Walter has a distinctive birthmark on his left hand, shaped like a crescent moon. Does yours? Amina checked Walter's hands while he slept that night, moving the blanket gently so as not to wake him. No birthmark, no crescent moon, just weathered skin and trembling fingers that twitched in dreams she couldn't see. Another dead end. She found a website dedicated to reuniting families separated by Alzheimer's. She scrolled through hundreds of faces, hundreds of names, hundreds of stories that all sounded the same. Father wandered away, mother disappeared from the backyard, husband went for a walk and never came back. The posts were dated weeks apart, months apart, years apart. Some had updates, found safe, others had different updates. Services will be held Saturday. Most had no updates at all, just faces frozen in time, waiting. She searched for variations of Walter in case someone had misspelled it. Searched for bridge engineer and construction, and New York history. Found articles about bridges and buildings but no missing persons reports that matched. One night, she thought she'd found him. A post on a California missing persons board, dated 11 months ago. The description was vague, white male, 70s, dementia, but there was something about the phrasing that caught her attention. He talks about his work constantly. He was very important once. He doesn't understand why no one recognizes him anymore. That sounded like Walter. The way he sometimes spoke about buildings and calculations, the fleeting pride in his voice before the fog rolled back in. Amina sent a message, waited, checked her phone obsessively for 2 days. The response when it came was from an adult daughter. Thank you, but my father was found last month. He had been living under an overpass in Sacramento. He's in a facility now. Good luck with your search. Good luck with your search. As if luck had anything to do with it. The searches became a ritual she dreaded and couldn't stop. Every night, the same routine. Put Noah to bed, check on Walter, sit at the kitchen table, type words into the search bar. Scroll through faces, feel hope rise, watch hope die. She learned the geography of missing persons forums, the particular grammar of desperation that families used when posting about loved ones who had slipped away. She learned to recognize the posts that were fresh and hopeful versus the ones that had been sitting for months, unanswered, like messages in bottles that would never reach shore. She learned that there were thousands of Walters in the world, and none of them were hers. Then on a Thursday night, 3 weeks after she'd started searching, exhaustion finally won. Amina had been scrolling for nearly 3 hours, her eyes burned. The words on the screen had stopped making sense, blurring into meaningless shapes. She'd clicked through dozens of posts, each one a small tragedy, none of them relevant. Her phone battery was at 8%, her back ached from hunching over the small screen. In 6 hours she had to be at the diner for a double shift. This is pointless, she thought. He could be anyone. He could be from anywhere. I'm never going to find his family. Her thumb hovered over the power button, ready to give up for the night, ready maybe to give up entirely. She could take Walter to a shelter, let the system handle it, stop carrying a weight that wasn't hers to carry. One more page, she told herself. Just one more. She scrolled past a post about a woman named Margaret, missing from Florida for 2 years. Past a teenager who had disappeared from a group home in Texas. Past an elderly couple who had both wandered away from their daughter's house and been found 3 days later in a park, holding hands, unable to remember their own names. Then her thumb stopped, a photo of a man in a suit and tie, smiling at the camera, his eyes sharp and confident. The photo was old, clearly from happier times, the kind of professional headshot that got taken for company newsletters or industry awards. The man in it looked nothing like her Walter. This man was clean-shaven, well-groomed, radiating the confidence of someone who had never known what it meant to be invisible. His suit was expensive, his smile was practiced, his whole bearing suggested a man who walked into rooms expecting to be noticed. Her Walter was weathered, broken, a shadow of whoever he had once been. Her Walter apologized for existing. Her Walter couldn't remember what city he was in. Amina's thumb moved to scroll past, then stopped. The eyes. Those pale blue eyes, tilted slightly as if listening to something no one else could hear. She knew those eyes. She'd watched them cloud with confusion and clear with recognition 100 times over the past weeks. She'd seen them fill with tears when Walter called out for Emily in his sleep. She'd seen them brighten when Noah made him laugh. Those were Walter's eyes. She enlarged the photo, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. Stripped away the beard in her mind, added the lines that years of hard living would carve into any face, Imagine the confidence replaced by confusion, the sharp gaze clouded by fog, the expensive suit traded for layered rags. It was him. It was Walter. The post read, "Seeking information, my father Walter Hale has been missing for approximately 14 months. He suffers from progressive dementia and was last seen in San Francisco. If you have any information about his whereabouts, please contact me immediately." San Francisco, 14 months. That meant Walter had somehow traveled 3,000 miles, alone, sick, confused, across an entire country. How was that even possible? How had he survived? How had no one noticed? Amina's hands shook as she searched the name, Walter Hale. The results made the room tilt around her. Articles from decades past, a young engineer at the forefront of his field. A company called Hale Engineering, built from nothing in the 1950s. Projects that shaped cities, bridges, tunnels, the infrastructure of American ambition. Awards from professional societies, profiles in business magazines. Photos of ribbon-cutting ceremonies with mayors and governors, and then more recent articles. A merger in the 80s that made the company part of something larger. A retirement announcement in the 90s, a slow fade from public life as a new generation took over. And finally the son, Ethan Hale, technology executive, CEO of a company that made software Amina had never heard of, but that apparently everyone in the industry considered essential. Net worth listed in Forbes, estimated at over $11 billion. Photos of a man in suits that made the father's old headshot look cheap, shaking hands with people whose names appeared in headlines. Amina sat back in her chair, her mind reeling. The man sleeping on her couch, the man who couldn't remember his own last name, was the father of a billionaire. She looked at the forum post again, at the phone number listed at the bottom. She could call right now, tell them she'd found Walter, end this whole strange chapter, and go back to her normal life. But something made her hesitate. The post was formal, businesslike. It read more like a missing asset report than a desperate plea from a grieving son, seeking information. Contact me immediately. Not, I miss him, I need him back, I can't sleep without knowing if he's safe. Just contact me immediately. And there was the question that had been nagging at her since the beginning. If Walter Hale was the father of a billionaire, how had he ended up alone and sick on a subway train in the middle of the night? Where had the son been for 14 months? Why hadn't he found his father sooner? A man with $11 billion could hire every private investigator in the country, could put Walter's face on billboards in every city, could offer rewards that would have people searching under every bridge and in every shelter from coast to coast. Instead there was a forum post. One forum post on a small website with a phone number and a formal request. Contact me immediately. Amina looked toward the living room, where Walter was sleeping on the couch. She could hear his breathing from here, slow and steady, the breathing of a man who finally felt safe enough to rest. What had happened to him? What had his life been like before the fog? What had driven him to walk away from everything and everyone he knew? And what kind of son lets his father disappear for 14 months? She picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up again. Whatever had happened before, Walter was here now. He was safe, he was cared for, and he deserved to know that someone was looking for him, even if that someone had taken 14 months to post on a forum. Amina typed out a message. I think I found him. He's safe, please call me. She included her phone number and hit send before she could change her mind. Then she sat in the dark kitchen, watching the screen, and waited for the world to change again. The call came at 7:32 the next morning. Amina had barely slept. She checked her phone every hour, watching for a response, imagining what she would say when the call finally came. Now with the phone buzzing in her hand, her mind went blank. She answered on the third ring. This is Ethan Hale. The voice was crisp, controlled, guarded, no warmth in it, no relief, just the tone of a man who was used to handling problems efficiently. You contacted me about my father. Yes, I believe he's here. With me, in New York. A pause. New York. Yes, he was last seen in San Francisco, 14 months ago. I can't explain how he got here. I just know I found him on the subway, alone and sick. He couldn't remember anything except his first name. Another pause, longer this time. Amina could almost hear the calculations happening on the other end of the line. The suspicion, the doubt, the assumption that this was probably a scam, another person trying to get money out of a rich man's desperation. Describe him. Amina described Walter, the beard, now trimmed by her own careful hands, the trembling that never quite stopped, the way he called out for Emily in his sleep, the fragments of memory about bridges and buildings, calculations and colleagues. When she finished, there was a sound on the other end that might have been a sharp intake of breath. Emily was my mother, Ethan said, his voice suddenly rough. She passed away 6 years ago. I'm sorry. Can I speak to him now? Amina looked over at Walter, who was sitting in the chair by the window, watching the morning light creep across the floor. He was having a quiet morning, not good but not bad, somewhere in between, where he spent most of his time. I should warn you, she said, he might not recognize you. His mind comes and goes, right now is uncertain. I understand. Please. Amina walked over to Walter and knelt beside him. Someone wants to talk to you, she said gently, someone who might know who you are. Walter looked at the phone in her hand like it might bite him. Who? I think it might be your son. Something flickered in Walter's eyes, fear maybe, or hope. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. He took the phone with trembling hands, held it to his ear. Listen. For a long moment, nothing happened. His face remained blank, uncomprehending. Amina watched, her chest tight, waiting for some sign of recognition. Then something shifted, a flicker behind his eyes, like a match striking in darkness. That voice, Walter whispered. I know that voice. Amina couldn't hear what Ethan was saying on the other end. She could only watch Walter's face as emotions played across it like weather. Confusion first, then something deeper. His brow furrowed, his lips trembled. My boy, he said, so quietly, Amina almost didn't hear. Is that my boy? He didn't say a name, didn't speak with certainty, but his hand, the one not holding the phone, reached out blindly, grasping at air. Amina took it, held tight. The call lasted only a few minutes before Walter's clarity began to fade. His sentences grew fragmented, his words slurred. By the end he was just listening, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, unable to speak. Amina gently took the phone back. He's tired, she said. The lucid moments don't last. I'm coming to New York. Ethan's voice was different now, still guarded but with something cracked underneath. Tomorrow I need to verify, I need to see for myself. I understand, Miss Brooks. A pause. If this is legitimate, if you really have been taking care of my father, we'll discuss appropriate compensation for your trouble. The word landed wrong. Compensation. Like Walter was a broken appliance she'd been storing in her closet. He's not trouble, Amina said quietly, and I don't want your money. She hung up before Ethan could respond. Tomorrow the sun was coming, and Amina had a feeling that everything was about to get much more complicated. Ethan Hale arrived the following afternoon, and he did not come alone. Amina watched through the window as the black car pulled up outside her building, sleek and expensive and utterly out of place on this street of cracked sidewalks and overflowing trash cans. The driver got out first, walked around, opened the door. Ethan emerged in a suit that cost more than 6 months of her rent. She could tell by the way it fit, perfect in a way that only custom tailoring achieved. Behind him came a woman with a briefcase, then a man with the watchful eyes of someone paid to be suspicious. A lawyer, an investigator, maybe both. 3 people to meet one tired waitress in a 2-room apartment. Noah was at school, Walter was resting. Amina had chosen this timing deliberately, wanting to meet Ethan on her own terms, without the complication of either the vulnerable old man or the innocent child. She watched them enter the building, heard their footsteps on the stairs. The knock, when it came, was sharp and businesslike. Amina took a breath, opened the door. Ethan Hale's eyes met hers, and she saw him take in everything about her in a single glance. Her dark skin, her tired face, her cheap clothes, the small apartment behind her with its worn furniture and water-stained ceiling. He was younger than she'd expected from the photos, mid-50s but with a face that had been preserved by money and careful living. His eyes were his father's eyes, that same pale blue, but where Walter's held confusion and gentleness, Ethan's held calculation, assessment. The look of a man who was used to measuring people and finding them wanting. "Miss Brooks." It wasn't a question. "Mr. Hale, may I come in?" She stepped aside. Ethan entered the apartment, his gaze sweeping over the space. The lawyer and investigator stayed in the hallway, which Amina supposed was meant to seem like a courtesy but felt more like a threat held in reserve. "My father," Ethan said, not bothering with small talk. "Where is he?" "Resting. In the other room." Ethan moved toward the bedroom door. Amina stepped into his path. "Before you see him we should talk." His jaw tightened. "About what?" "About what happens next. About how this works." "How it works is that I verify this is actually my father, and then I take him home. That's how it works. And if he doesn't want to go?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Ethan's expression flickered, something human underneath the business mask, before it slid back into place. "He has dementia, Miss Brooks. He doesn't know what he wants. He knows he feels safe here. He knows my name. He knows my brother's name. He knows this couch, and this window, and this apartment. Those things matter to someone whose mind is failing. Familiarity matters. What matters is getting him proper care. Medical attention, specialists who can actually help him." Instead of, he gestured at the apartment, the implication clear. Instead of what? Instead of someone who actually stopped to help him when he was dying on a subway train. Ethan's face hardened. "You don't know anything about his medical needs. And where was all that proper medical care for the past 14 months? Where were the specialists when he was wandering alone across the country? Where were you?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she didn't take them back. Ethan's face went still, a dangerous kind of still. "You don't know anything about the past 14 months. I know the outcome of the past 14 months. I know he was alone. I know he was starving. I know he was so sick he almost died, and not a single person stopped to help him except me." Before Ethan could respond, the bedroom door opened. Walter stood there in the clothes Amina had washed for him, his hair combed, his beard trimmed, looking more present than he had in days. His eyes moved between Amina and Ethan, reading the tension in the air. "What's happening?" he asked. "Why is everyone shouting?" No one had been shouting, but Amina understood. For Walter, tension itself was loud. Ethan's composure cracked. The businessman disappeared, and for a moment, there was just a man looking at his father for the first time in over a year. He stepped forward, his voice suddenly thick. "Dad, it's me, it's Ethan." Walter studied his son's face, studied it the way a man might study a photograph he wasn't sure was real. Recognition flickered, then faded, then flickered again. "Ethan," he repeated slowly, tasting the name like food he couldn't quite identify. "Yes, Dad, I'm here. I've been looking for you for so long." "Looking?" Walter's brow furrowed. "Were you?" I don't remember you looking." "That's okay, you don't have to remember. I'm here now. I'm going to take you home." Something shifted in Walter's expression. The confusion cleared, replaced by something sharper. "Fear." "Home," he said. "Where is home?" "California, Dad. You remember California? The house? Your room?" Walter shook his head slowly, his eyes drifted to Amina, and when he spoke, his voice was stronger than it had been in days. "I want to stay here." Ethan flinched like he'd been struck. "Dad, this woman isn't family. She's a stranger. You've only known her for a few weeks." She stopped. Walter's voice grew more certain with each word. "On the train. It was cold and dark, and I was so scared, and everyone walked past like I wasn't there, like I didn't exist. But she stopped. She sat with me, she gave me soup and a blanket, and she didn't ask for anything." "Dad, you want to take me somewhere?" Walter stepped backward, his hands rising as if to ward something off. "You want to put me in a place with white walls, where people are kind but they don't see me, where I disappear." "That's not true. That's not what I want. You did it before." Walter's voice cracked. "I remember that. You put me somewhere and I disappeared, and I had to run away because I couldn't breathe there. I couldn't think. I couldn't." His breathing had gone ragged, his hands shaking violently. This was worse than confusion. This was terror. Amina moved without thinking, stepping between Ethan and the doorway, making herself a barrier. "You need to leave," she said quietly. "I'm not leaving without my father. Look at him. You're terrifying him. He doesn't know what he's saying. He's confused." "Maybe, but confused or not, he's choosing to be here right now, and I'm not going to let you drag him out like he's property to be reclaimed. Ethan's face darkened, his hands clenched at his sides. For a moment, Amina thought he might push past her anyway, might use his money and his lawyers and his investigators to simply take what he considered his. Then the woman with the briefcase stepped forward and put a hand on Ethan's arm. Mr. Hale, perhaps we should reconvene tomorrow. Give everyone time to calm down. Ethan looked at her, at Amina, at the closed door behind which his father had retreated. This isn't over, he said. I know. He turned and walked out without another word. The lawyer and the investigator followed. The front door closed behind them. Amina stood in the sudden silence, her heart racing. Then she went to the bedroom and found Walter huddled on the bed, his arms wrapped around himself, his eyes wide and wet. He wants to take me away, Walter whispered. He wants to lock me up. Amina sat beside him and took his trembling hand. No one is taking you anywhere tonight, I promise. She didn't know if she could keep that promise, but she made it anyway. The next few days were a siege. Ethan didn't come back himself, but his people did. The investigator asked questions around the building, the neighborhood, the diner. Where did Amina work? How much did she make? Had anyone seen anything suspicious? The lawyer sent official-looking letters requesting meetings, citing legal precedents about family rights and medical guardianship, and the police returned. Not the same officers as before, but new ones, with shinier badges and more pointed questions. How long had Walter been staying here? What was the nature of their relationship? Had Amina ever received money from him, directly or indirectly? Was she aware that housing a vulnerable adult without proper authorization could be considered a crime? She answered every question honestly and completely, because she had nothing to hide, but she could feel the walls closing in. Linda called her into the office during a shift and told her that a man in an expensive suit had been asking questions about her. I didn't tell him anything, Linda said. But Amina, whatever you've gotten yourself into, you need to be careful. These people have resources you don't. Mrs. Patterson, who watched Noah in the evenings, mentioned that someone had been asking about Amina's brother. Just general questions, she said. What time he comes home from school, who picks him up, whether he seems happy. Her face was worried. I didn't like the look of him, Amina. I didn't like it at all. Then came the moment with Noah. Amina was at work when it happened. She came home to find her brother sitting at the kitchen table, his face tear-streaked, his small hands clenched into fists. What happened? She asked immediately, dropping to her knees beside him. What's wrong? A man came to school. Noah's voice was thin, fragile, not like him at all. During recess, he said he was your friend. He said you'd sent him to check on me. Amina's blood went cold. What did he look like? Nice suit, nice smile, but his eyes were wrong. Noah looked up at her. His eyes didn't smile. What did he ask you? About Mr. Walter, where he sleeps, what he says, whether he ever gets angry or scary. Noah's voice cracked. He said maybe Mr. Walter should be in a hospital. He said maybe it wasn't safe for me to live with him. He said maybe I should tell a teacher if anything bad happened. What did you tell him? I said Mr. Walter is the nicest person I ever met. I said he helps me with my homework, and he never gets angry and he calls me young man, like I'm important. Noah's eyes, wet but fierce, met hers. I said if anyone tried to take him away, I would hide him. I would hide him forever, and no one would ever find him. Amina pulled her brother into her arms and held him tight. You did good, she whispered. You did so good, baby. I'm proud of you. But inside she was shaking with rage. Ethan Hale had sent someone to question her 8-year-old brother at school, had tried to use a child to build a case against her, had reached into the one part of her life she'd tried to keep protected and safe. She stood up, her jaw tight. Stay here with Mr. Walter. Don't answer the door for anyone at all. Where are you going? To make a phone call. She stepped into the hallway, pulled out her phone and dialed the number from the forum post. Ethan answered on the second ring. Miss Brooks, you sent someone to my brother's school. A pause. I don't know what you're talking about. You sent someone to question an 8-year-old child about his living situation, during school hours, without my knowledge or permission. An 8-year-old, Mr. Hale, a little boy who has done nothing wrong except love your father. I'm investigating the situation. I have every right. He's a child. He's not part of your situation. He's not a witness or a source or leverage. He's a scared little boy who now thinks someone is going to take away the only family he has left besides me. Silence on the other end. You want to investigate me, Amina continued, her voice low and controlled but carrying an edge that could cut. Fine, investigate me. Go through my bank records, talk to my neighbors, dig through every corner of my life. You won't find anything, because there's nothing to find. I work double shifts to pay for medicine for a little boy whose lungs don't work right. I brought your father home because he was dying and no one else cared. That's it, that's the whole story. More silence. But you come near my brother again, and I will make sure every news outlet in this city, in this country, knows that billionaire Ethan Hale sent investigators to terrorize children. I will make your face and your name synonymous with cruelty. I have nothing to lose, Mr. Hale. You have everything. The silence stretched out for a long moment. Then what do you want? I want you to leave Noah alone. I want you to stop treating me like a criminal, and I want you to come see your father like a human being instead of a problem to be solved. She hung up before he could respond. The next morning, Ethan Hale came back, alone this time. No lawyers, no investigators, no expensive car with a driver, just him in a suit that looked slept in, standing at her door with shadows under his eyes. When Amina opened the door, she expected hostility, expected more accusations, more demands, more legal threats. Instead, Ethan looked smaller, tired, like something had broken inside him during the night. Can we talk? He asked. Just talk. Amina studied him for a long moment, then she stepped aside. They sat in Amina's small living room, the four of them, Amina, Ethan, Walter and Noah, who had refused to go to his room, and instead sat beside Walter on the couch, his small hand wrapped around the old man's weathered fingers. No one had forced the arrangement. Noah had simply come out of the bedroom when he heard voices, seen Walter, and taken his place at the old man's side like a guard dog. Walter's hand had found Noah's automatically the way it always did now, as if the contact grounded him in the present. Ethan watched his father with an expression Amina couldn't read. Pain maybe, guilt, something that had been buried for years and was now clawing its way to the surface. For a long moment, no one spoke. The morning light came through the window, catching the dust motes in the air, illuminating the worn fabric of the couch and the drawings taped to the walls and the small life Amina had built in this cramped apartment. He looks better than I expected, Ethan said finally, his voice quiet. The reports said, they said he'd deteriorated significantly. They said he might not be verbal anymore. He has good days and bad days, Amina replied. More good lately, because of you. Because of stability, because of routine, because of having a place where he feels safe. Ethan nodded slowly. He still hadn't taken his eyes off Walter. I owe you an apology, he said. Several apologies actually, for how I treated you, for what I assumed, for he paused, and for the first time, he looked at Noah. For Noah, that should never have happened. I was wrong. The words seemed to cost him something. Amina could see it in the tension of his jaw, the stiffness of his shoulders. This was a man who wasn't used to admitting fault. A man who had spent his whole life being right, or at least being powerful enough that no one could tell him otherwise. Why did you assume the worst? She asked. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. His hands, she noticed, were clasped tightly in his lap. Because that's what I've been trained to do, he said finally. My whole life people have wanted things from me, from my family. Everyone has an angle, an agenda, a price. When I was 22, a woman I thought loved me, sold stories about me to tabloids for $50,000. When I was 30, a business partner I trusted tried to steal half my company. When I was 40, my own cousin sued me for a share of an inheritance he wasn't entitled to. He met her eyes. I stopped believing in kindness a long time ago. That sounds lonely. It is. He looked back at his father. When I got your message, my first thought wasn't Dad is alive. It was how much is this going to cost me? What kind of son thinks that? Amina didn't answer. She didn't need to. Walter stirred on the couch, his eyes, which had been distant and vague, slowly focused. Ethan, he said. The name came out clearer than before, like he was waking from a long sleep. Ethan leaned forward. Dad, I'm here. I remember why I left. The room went still. You put me somewhere with white walls, Walter said slowly, each word an effort but clear. Everyone was kind, too kind. The kind of kind that means they don't see you as a person anymore. They see you as a problem. His voice shook. I could feel myself disappearing. Every day a little more, and I thought, if I'm going to disappear, I want to choose where. I want to walk until I find somewhere that feels real. Ethan's composure crumpled. Dad, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. I wasn't angry at you. Walter's trembling hand reached toward his son. I was angry at what was happening to me, at losing your mother, at losing myself. You were just there, close enough to hurt. Ethan took his father's hand. Tears slid down his cheeks, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. Noah, who had been silent this whole time, spoke up in his small, clear voice. Mr. Walter, are you going to leave us? The question cut through everything else in the room. Walter looked down at the boy, at this child who had shown him nothing but kindness from the first night, and something in his expression softened. I don't want to, he said honestly, but some things aren't up to me. They could be. Noah looked at Ethan, his eyes fierce and wet at the same time. You're in charge, right? You get to decide. Ethan stared at his father's hand in his, at the small boy who had attached himself to a stranger, at the woman who had given everything she had to care for someone she didn't know. Maybe, he said slowly, we can figure something out together. Over the next few weeks the story emerged in pieces. Ethan's investigators, who had been looking for reasons to doubt Amina, found evidence of her sacrifice instead. Bank records showing money spent on food and medicine she couldn't afford. Testimony from Linda about the extra shifts Amina had taken to cover the costs. Statements from Mrs. Patterson about the nights Amina had stayed up tending to Walter's fever. The police officers who had been so suspicious admitted that they'd found nothing improper. The neighbors who had complained admitted that Walter had been quiet, gentle, no trouble at all. And Walter himself in his clearer moments told anyone who would listen what Amina had done. She stopped, he said, again and again. When the whole world walked past, she stopped. The first time Ethan heard those words, something in his face changed. The second time, he understood. The third time he asked Amina to sit with him alone. I've spent my whole life building things, he said. Companies, systems, I forgot how to build what matters. He paused. You reminded me, I didn't do anything special. You did the most special thing there is. He laid out his plan. A trust fund for Noah's education. A new apartment. A job that didn't require double shifts. And my father stays in New York, Ethan concluded. Close to you. Close to Noah. He's happier here than I've seen him in years. Amina was quiet for a long moment. This is too much, she said finally. It's not nearly enough. She thought about Noah, the inhaler refills, the landlord's notices, all the years of just barely surviving. She thought about Walter, his good days and bad days, the way he looked at Noah like the boy was precious. She thought about Ruth, about stopping when you could have walked past, about the weight you carry forever. I didn't do it for this, she said quietly. I know, Ethan said. That's exactly why it matters. 6 months later, the subway platform looked different in the afternoon light. Cleaner somehow, less heavy. Amina stood at the spot where she'd first seen Walter, watching the trains come and go. Noah was beside her, taller now, stronger now, his lungs steady thanks to a specialist who knew how to help. They weren't there to catch a train, they were there to remember. This is where you found him, Noah said, not a question. Right there. Amina pointed to the bench at the far end. He was so scared. Are you glad you stopped? Amina looked at her brother, at this boy who had grown so much in such a short time, who had a grandfather now, even if it had come from the strangest of places. Every day, she said, a train arrived. Passengers got off. Passengers got on. The doors closed and the train moved on into the dark. Life continuing, the way it always did. They walked out of the station together into the light, toward a future that finally felt like it belonged to them. Amina thought about Ruth, about the lesson she'd learned on a winter night, so many years ago. If you turn away when you could have stopped, you carry that with you forever. She hadn't turned away, and now instead of carrying weight, she was carried, by Noah, by Walter. by the strange, unlikely family they'd become. She didn't change the world, she just stopped, and that had changed everything.